Another year done and dusted, and thus it is time for gamers one and all to begin the age-old obligatory tradition of the Game of the Year list. Yep, my friends, the time to look back at the whole year and discuss the best that this year had to offer. And what did I think of 2024 as a whole for gaming? I mean, it's complicated, really. Gaming-wise, while this year was definitely a little slower by most normal accounts, especially when compared to 2023, the games that we got from this year were still some absolute bangers. No doubt about that. But it's really hard to call this a good year, not because of the games, really, but because of how much crap that's been going around the industry lately. It just felt like every month something was going on. To sleazy business practices, several studio closures, some significantly worse than others. I'm looking at you, Xbox and Tencent. And then you got like several soulless, cash grabby, or just plain preachy games that just completely ignore what gamers really want. But like I said, with all the good games we got from this year, hell, great games, really great games that we got from this year, I can't call this a bad year either. If anything, it was a mixed year, a very interesting year. A year with some extreme highs and some extreme lows. And honestly, if nothing else, I feel like going forward, a lot of things are about to change in this game industry because of, yes, some of the bad, but mostly a lot of the good. But let's stop beating around the bush and let's get straight to the W's of 2024, because frankly, I got some good ones to talk about this year. So let's start counting down the top 10 games of 2024. So let's start things out with my lucky number 10, aka the only Ubisoft game I've played in almost 3 years that I can unequivocally, genuinely call pretty damn good: Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It sucks. It really freaking blows that the one good Ubisoft game we truly got all year, the only one actually worthy of awards, is the game that gets its dev team disbanded. Come on, Ubisoft, what are you doing? This is actually a polished, non-buggy, exciting, and beautiful Metroidvania that deserves significantly better than it got. Now, the game isn't adding anything really new, barring some super sick time-related platforming and puzzles that are honestly really cool, but what it lacks in that newness, it makes up with just pure polish. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown plays great from combat and platforming. The game is just smooth as margarine and runs like a dream, which also adds to make the combat and the platforming a joy to partake in. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is tough, but it's also rewarding, and no matter how difficult an enemy encounter or a platforming challenge gets, and they do get tough, you never once feel like the game is working against you, and it makes it even better when you finally succeed, and it really feels like you overcame a challenge. It's not flawless. In fact, the story is much weaker than I was expecting. But the game shines where it matters, and that's with its stellar combat and platforming. Add that with the gorgeous presentation and badass soundtrack, and you get a damn good Metroidvania and an actually good Ubisoft game. And despite all the bullshit that Ubisoft has been spewing all year, you gotta give the credit where the credit it's due, and The Lost Crown certainly deserves it. Hot take: Neva is one of the most gorgeous games ever made. I genuinely believe that. More beautiful than any 4K hyper-realistic game that has been coming out, there are shots in Neva that I swear to Aisha blew me away. Almost every frame of this game can be screenshotted and kept as a wallpaper, and that is telling. I feel like if nothing else, Neva needs to be remembered and praised for its visuals. However, visuals alone don't get on a Game of the Year list. It's also just a pretty big improvement on Gris in every way. The platforming, while not the most polished or even really the best, is still surprisingly really clever and unique, and that goes double for the puzzles in this game. The combat in Neva, while not really deep, is still pretty fun, with a unique mechanic that allows Neva to become more useful in battle as she gets older. That's actually really cool. And then you have the wordless story and the gorgeous simplistic soundtrack that is just beautiful and moving. And further proof on how you don't need a long story with drawn out monologues to display deep emotions and real, not heavy-handed messages. Sometimes all you need is a moving soundtrack with some of the most gorgeous visuals to ever appear in a game. Again, Neva's not flawless. In fact, this is definitely a personal choice. I can see a lot of people disagreeing with this one. But I just feel like for the presentation alone, Neva is certainly one of the best indies of this year. Consider this my out loud official apology. I was wrong. I was incredibly incorrect about Silent Hill 2. I'm not flawless. We all make mistakes, but in my defense, the trailers looked really rough. And yet despite all that, Silent Hill 2 Remake still managed to surprise just about everyone with how freaking good it was. I mean, I can't comment on how faithful it is to the original game, seeing as how I never played it. I know it's on my to-do list. I'll play it at some point before I die. But the best thing I can say is playing this remake makes me want to go and play the original ASAP. Not because the remake is bad, but because it's so good. I want to see where that greatness originated from. And barring the fact that this is a remake, this is also some damn good horror. You'd be hard-pressed to find a game with a better, more oppressive atmosphere than Silent Hill 2. One thing that Blooper Team has always excelled at is the visual and the audio design. I will always give Blooper Team that, and Silent Hill 2 is no exception. This game is an absolute looker. The detail of the facial animations, the peeling of the paint, the little rubble on the ground, the clutter in the streets, it both makes Silent Hill feel alive but also completely abandoned, adding into the dread that Blooper Team is just oh so grand at. And then the audio of this game. You can't have good horror without good audio. And the creaks of the floor, the sound of your footsteps, the little scurrying of monsters away in the distance. Oh, it's like every step taken in this game was meant to leave you on edge. The atmosphere of Silent Hill 2 is truly among the best of its kind. And then all that works even better when you combine it with a really damn good story. A story that's packed with twists and turns that, if you're unfamiliar with the series, like myself, will honestly shock the hell out of you, especially after you dig deeper after you finish the game. No joke, there are some moments in this game that got significantly scarier and more disturbing after I looked into it. And the story wouldn't be nearly as great as it was if it wasn't for fantastic performances across the board, particularly Luke Roberts as James Sunderland. Best performance of the year easily. It takes a lot of skill to be able to say so much with very little word. Even on the gameplay side, well, not all the gameplay side, but the exploration was very fun. The puzzles, while they can go on a little too long, are still really cool and give you a great eureka moment after you finish them, which I always love. The game has those typical blooper issues, particularly in combat, but really between the story and the atmosphere alone, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better example of modern horror and really a modern remake than Silent Hill 2. Once again, just completely proven wrong. Now, when this game was first revealed, I was naturally pumped as a big Indiana Jones fan, right? But then Xbox just kept collecting a perfect hand of just straight L's this entire year that led me to become way more skeptical the closer that we got to release. Not to mention, releasing a game in December is usually never a good sign. But once again, I was left completely surprised when Indiana Jones and the Great Circle became the single best piece of Indiana Jones media we've gotten in years. And it's not just because the cinematic feel of this game is on point, which it is, by the way. This game is just Indiana Jones, man. Like old school, classic indie. From the incredible score, the sick action set pieces, and the great, extremely likable, and very well acted characters, including a very slimy villain who I just love to hate, and then frickin' Indiana Jones himself, who Troy Baker really helps to bring to life by channeling his inner Harrison Ford better than anyone, including myself, really expected. But with everything I just said, that's not what makes it special. That's not what makes Indiana Jones really great. It's just how easily it could have been an Uncharted clone, but it isn't. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle has several little changes to help really set itself apart from not just the Uncharted series, but even other games that Machine Games has made. Between large and dense areas to explore packed with side quests, the first-person perspective with an incredible focus on puzzle solving and exploration more than anything, and despite gunplay being in the game, not being the type of game where a shootout is your best bet, but more strategic stealth mixed with brutal hand-to-hand combat. Indiana Jones, simply put, didn't have to try this hard. It could have gone the third-person route and been a cover shooter, etc., but they didn't, and they decided to make a game that felt its own, and more importantly, so distinctly Indiana Jones. Does a game have issues? Of course it does. But between literally everything Indiana Jones and the Great Circle accomplishes, it really is one of Indy's finest outings, and just by all accounts, another pleasant surprise in 2024. So you probably think that the best Metroidvania that we got in 2024 was Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. With its flashy graphics and smooth gameplay and whatnot, surely Lost Crown was peak Metroidvania, and to be fair, it was, until I played a little game called Animal Well. A game that gets more impressive the more you think about it. Now, Animal Well takes a very different approach from most Metroidvanias, where you don't really have a means of defense. There is no real combat. The majority of this game is solving puzzles and finding ways to avoid the enemy rather than combat it, which already is pretty unique and not something you see often in games like this. But if you're going to do that, then you have to make sure that the puzzles and the exploration that you are offering is top tier. And in Animal Well, they honestly, truly are. Using the household items turn life-saving treasures to help navigate around a surprisingly massive and dense map and solve the mysteries of this place with very little hand-holding, by the way, is a mixture of just insanely fun and immensely satisfying, especially when searching for the many hidden secrets and collectibles in Animal Well. And with all that, Animal Well just looks great with a unique minimalist design and music that honestly borderlines from very little to almost non-existent, but that really just helps to give Animal Well such a stellar atmosphere. Animal Well is just a game that pulls you in and it keeps you there. And yet what really makes Animal Well special is the fact that it achieves everything I just said, and it was developed by one guy. If you told me that a game this big, with this much stuff to find, that ran and looked this well, came from one guy, I would not have believed you. I'll be completely honest. But here we are in a timeline where one guy has made not just one of the best games of the year, but genuinely one of the best Metroidvanias we've had in some time. The Persona games are some of the most popular and creative JRPG series in the modern age, and that level of creativity and presentation that is found in the Persona games is spilling over in Metaphor. Between the characters looking great, the world looking great, the frickin' UIs once again looking stellar, Metaphor does not skip on just pure creativity in its design. And while Metaphor is in many ways very similar to Persona, it's far from being, just that. It's actually very refined. It takes a lot of the problems that came from the Persona games, like Persona 5, and makes several quality of life improvements, adding more depth and variety to your party via the archetype system, or the incredible addition of real melee combat that, if you're at a high enough level, will allow you to clear almost full-scale sections by just melee attacking. I mean, it's not like massive overhauls or anything, but they are significant changes that go a long way in making Metaphor just a better game to play. And then you just got the basic strengths of any Persona game, right? It's incredibly deep and sometimes incredibly challenging turn-based combat. The really freaking great, if not quite as earworm-inducing, musical score. And then you got a strong story that in many ways is more mature than Atlus has previously done, focusing on heavy political themes that most of the time do work. Now, isn't necessarily the best story that everyone is hailing it to be. Not quite, but I do think it is a pretty darn good one. And that right there actually describes Metaphor as a whole for me. I don't think it's flawless. I can't even quite call it Atlus's magnum opus or the best game that they have made in a long time. But thanks to great quality of life improvements in the gameplay and the refinement of the typical great things that Atlus always does well, while Metaphor ReFantazio is not flawless, it is still a pretty damn quality JRPG. Stellar Blade. Good old Stellar Blade. Where do you even begin with this one? Well, for starters, I promise you, Stellar Blade is not here for the reasons that you think, okay? While Stellar Blade does have a smoke show of a protagonist, and the game doesn't shy away from showing off her assets, what makes the game is the fact that Stellar Blade is just good. Not just good, great. Really freaking great. Like, you come for the pretty protagonist, sure, but then you stay for all of the other aspects that Stellar Blade gets right. Like, for example, the combat. The combat in Stellar Blade is some of the best of this year, hands down, with it looking, feeling, and playing great. With, by my salt, the best, most satisfying parry system of this year. The world of Stellar Blade is also colorful, detailed, and gorgeous, with the game taking full advantage of the PS5 hardware. And honestly, just exploring the world of Stellar Blade via partaking in side quests that honestly are better than the main quest itself, collecting the drinking cans, and of course collecting all of the customizable options for Eve, Lily, Adam, etc. It's a surprisingly enjoyable side dish to search for as you make your way through Stellar Blade's world. But what makes Stellar Blade particularly very special for me is, despite all the backlash, Stellar Blade is just a pure example of what the industry is lacking a lot of: real games. Stellar Blade's first priority is and foremost putting the player first. And thanks to the obvious passion that the devs put into making this, it shows. Stellar Blade was made to be just a constant enjoyment and is designed for the express purpose of being fun. Not necessarily trying to push boundaries, but to make sure that the player is always smiling. And I think in the times that we live in now, that is just wonderful. Stellar Blade is the perfect example of what happens where you put the fun factor of the game and, most importantly, the player first. You get one of the best action games of the year that is truly, above all else, pretty freaking stellar. Now, literally everything I felt about Stellar Blade, as previously discussed, double that feeling, and that's how I felt when I played Black Myth Wukong. Now, this one may be more personal. Objectively speaking, Stellar Blade is just a better playing game. It's the better playing action game. But why is Black Myth Wukong higher than Stellar Blade? Well, Black Myth Wukong, in my opinion, has a lot of the same strengths that I'd give to Stellar Blade, but I feel like it has two big things that I really feel like makes it pretty damn unique. And those are its setting and its scale. For one thing, I don't think we have ever had a game go this deep into the mythology and world of ancient China before, and I have to say, it's welcome. I love to learn, I love to experience new things, and between the sheer visual fidelity and the design of the monsters, the characters, this is just an incredible world that's just so immersive. It's difficult not to lose yourself. The game's world and characters, and especially for a mythology that we as gamers see so very little of, is simply awe-inducing, you know, like that feeling of just pure wonder, magic, and spectacle. And speaking of spectacle, when you combine those two things, you get something that is, in one word, epic. Black Myth Wukong feels like what it's based off of, a massive odyssey. To all the beautiful locales that you visit, every single one of this game's massive, beautifully designed, and multi-layered bosses, Black Myth Wukong is big. And it embraces it to a degree that, again, just really makes you appreciate not just the game, but the culture. And then with everything else, the game is just good. Is it the best combat of the year? Not quite, but it is still really freaking good, with hits feeling weighty and you having multiple different stances and moves at your disposal. Hell, even light RPG elements that do go a good way at making this feel like you have a choice in your fight style. But if I'm being honest, Black Myth is here because it focuses on an area that we don't see often. And I was just entirely blown away and sucked in, and that area just absolutely stuck with me. While also just being a game-ass game, being fun and putting the player first. I didn't have much interest in Black Myth at the time, but having played it, the devs absolutely cooked with this one. And the next game in the Black Myth series, at least for me, can't come soon enough. This year's top 2, as per usual, was pretty close. Both these games gave some of the best experiences I have had all year easily. But at the end of the day, I made a call, and it was actually an easier call than I thought it would be. Astrobot is just that game. Know what I mean? If I were to say which game from this year was objectively the best game of 2024, not personal, not most fun, just by and large the single most polished and enjoyable, flawless experience of 2024, you'd be hard-pressed to say anything else other than Astrobot. Now, is it the most unique game? No, at least not exactly. By all accounts, its skeleton is still the same, in the sense that the bare bones of this game are still very similar to that of other platformers. But what it lacks in that, it makes up with the key word: polish. It runs flawless at 4K graphics with no stutters, no glitches, and no performance issues. Every move from Astrobot, from running, jumping, hovering, attacking, and the speed of the many power-up tools that you get, it just runs and feels wonderful. But then aesthetically, the visual and audio of Astrobot are just consistently banging. The game is colorful and packed with adorable little details, and with a soundtrack that is packed with almost consistent toe tappers. I mean, the opening theme alone is indicative to just how catchy a lot of the songs in this game are. Then if I stopped there, the game still would have been great. But then they go above and beyond and make it genuinely the biggest celebration of PlayStation ever. It shines on the popular, the niche, the good, the bad, everything. And if you are a big fan of a lot of PlayStation games, then you'll love seeing your favorite characters represented through either little bots to collect or massive full-scale levels dedicated to that game. Astrobot is, above all else, with everything I just said, so freaking fun. It is the single most fun game of this year. Team Asobi, well done. It's fun, it's colorful, it plays great, it sounds great. Astrobot is just freaking great. But you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a goddamn minute. With all that that sounds like something you would put for Game of the Year. With all that praise, what the hell could possibly be my Game of the Year? And if you know all the other games that I played in 2024, then you probably know that my number one is pretty obvious. And the answer will be coming soon after honorable mentions. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Ugly HUD and typical Switch issues aside, the puzzles, art style, and old school dungeons made Echoes of Wisdom a very strong first adventure for Zelda as the main hero. Unicorn Overlord. Typical strong art style matched with surprisingly deep tactical strategy mechanics makes this one of the strongest vanillaware games ever made. Still Wakes the Deep. Strong story plus great acting plus stellar and unique atmosphere and location equal a damn quality narrative horror and one of the best we have gotten in some time. Marvel Rivals. The first multiplayer that genuinely feels like it can rival Overwatch. It's quick, it's snappy, it looks cool, it plays well, and most importantly, it doesn't waste your time or cheat you, which I really respect. And finally, Persona 3 Reload. With a year of quality remakes and remasters, Persona 3 Reload stands out with the same strong JRPG mechanics you can expect from Persona, while also giving you likable characters, cool visuals, and a sick soundtrack. And with that said, everyone, my Game of the Year 2024.
Thing is, Cloud, I really like you. But then, like can mean a lot of different things, can't it? Because there's liking, and then there's liking.
Seriously, what's going on? You've been weird all day.
I'm sorry. Whatever happens, don't blame yourself. Cloud, thank you.
So this is an interesting one, because if I'm being honest with myself, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not flawless. I'd argue compared to other games on this list, it is significantly far from flawless. I can tell you easily that this game has some aspects of it that borderline almost got me to stop playing. I said that in my review of the game. So then why is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth my game of the year? It's really simple. It's really the only game from 2024 that stuck with me. With so many games coming out in a single year, it's really difficult for any game to stay with me long term. But throughout the entire year, several games coming out, both ranging from incredible to not that incredible, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was never far from my mind. From listening to the soundtrack, from watching the gameplay, to discussing the story and its characters, it is the only one that, despite its flaws, stuck with me almost consistently. And I think it's because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is just packed with more incredible moments than not. Sure, the game is flawed, but when I finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, at the end of the day, the things that end up sticking with you are all positive. Because when the game hits, not only does it hit hard, but it hits harder than most of the other games that came out from this year. Like, it significantly improved super fun gameplay with its addictive mixture of RPG and real-time action, with visuals that impress throughout, a soundtrack that is easily the best soundtrack of the year, a world that, yeah, might be bloated, but is undeniably packed with things to collect, side quests to do, relationships to form, and minigames to play, including the most addictive minigame I've played all year, All Hail Queen's Blood. A story that may be a little confusing, but at the end of the day, thanks to great writing and performances across the board, particularly from Aerith and Barrett, the game does make you feel big things. When the game really wants to be funny, it can be absolutely hysterical. But when the game really wants to be heartbreaking, it can seriously move you more than you were even expecting. And that's just because of how much you grow attached to all of these characters and this world. Everything I just said is just how all of the strengths of this game can easily outweigh its very apparent flaws, to the point that, yes, you notice the flaws while you play, but after you dump a whopping 69 hours into the game, you walk away with nothing but fond memories. And I think that is important. All that to say, despite the problems, When Final Fantasy VII Rebirth gets it right, it gets it right. Point blank, period. It is not flawless, but I'll be damned if it's still not one of the best games I played all year, one of my new favorite ARPGs, and most importantly, my 2024 Game of the Year. And that was my top 10 of 2024, everybody. Yay! Love making this video. It's my favorite video to make every year. Always a blast. Let me know in the comments what your game of the year is. I am always interested to hear. My next video, if I have time, I am going to make a why I'm buying for a really awesome game called Eternal Strands. If I don't have enough time for that, I am going to make one for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That game is going to be awesome. My next review, that is going to be my Alien Isolation retrospective. I've been working on that on the side. I'm already like halfway done. So hopefully that's not going to take too much longer. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. It helps a ton. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm playing, follow me on Instagram. That's @TheGamerCritic. Be good people, and I will talk to all of you very soon. Okay, peace.